So what we've done as a residents group is to collect up some general questions to explore people's most recent queries and to have you address those. So one of the big themes that we've had all the way along is...
Mike, sorry, could you go in front of the... Some people aren't going to be able to hear you.
Maybe use the mic.
Use your mic.
This-
Yeah, the mic.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. You have to make sure you don't trip over this sort of wash acid, but okay. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool, thank you very much. Okay, so format of this is going to be based around some general questions that we know that the community has, and we'll work through those and then flip over to the more ministerial questions when Michael would arise. So the first thing that's been on people's minds ever since February is around timelines. So we'll start with that one. So we've seen timelines published which indicate a conclusion to detailed geotech happening in August sometime, and then there's a period of time after that, but we don't really know what that involves or how long that will take. For us, obviously our big concerns are around how we're going to pay rent and things like that over a long duration. So from the council's perspective, we're really keen to understand and how reliable is that August timeline? What are we likely to see after that? Do you have any views on that?
Well, you will get that phone. Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you. We'll probably split this answer into two parts. So I'll talk about the geotechnical program. I'll pass over to Matt to talk about the program beyond that. So, yeah, you've all heard the program ending at the end of August. We're still on track for that. There are always going to be potential uncertainties around that. This is the first time we've done this. When it was done previously in Christchurch, in the Port Hills, it took about 2 years to do this process. So it took about 2 years to do this work in the Port Hills. We've sped it up very significantly, but we're still confident that the end of August is the right timeline, that we are going to meet that. And at the end of that process, we'll be able to have the risk categories for all the properties. So that is on track. And then beyond that, there's the,
We still can't hear you.
beyond that, there's the extra process that you talked about. And for that, I'll pass it over to Matt.
There are some seats up here, 6 seats, if anyone wants a seat.
You do come and sit down.
So, thanks to Ross there for the confirmation around the timeline of the geotechnical and the categorisation which that gets us to. Of course, the question then after that is how would any potential buyout of a home occur? What would the mechanism for that be between council and a homeowner, and what would be government's and council's involvement in that? How would the share between government and council work? The answers to that are still not known. Today, just as I was driving here, in fact, Auckland Council have been invited now by government to negotiations to get to the bottom of those questions. And that actually starts tomorrow, so we've been invited today, tomorrow, to begin negotiations with Treasury to get to the bottom of who's paying for what and how that all works. I have seen Minister Robertson say 2 or 3 weeks ago that he expected those negotiations, let's call them, between central and local government on how Category 3 buyouts work to be concluded within weeks. And looking at the speed that things are now happening, it seems like that would still be the case. So I wouldn't have thought we would get to August and not know how the mechanism for a buyout would work. So that's going to get fixed before then.
Sorry, as an extension to that. Sorry, as an extension to that, the uncertainty that you just described is a problem between council and central government. I'm getting there. I'm contextualising, right? It's a problem for central government and the council to figure out. For us, we want to know whether that's going to cause us a problem. Is that uncertainty going to potentially undermine things? Or are there hard deadlines that are put upon the council and the government to achieve a conclusive decision on a certain date? Do you know?
No, there isn't a certain date. As I've just said, Minister Robertson won't sit down in weeks. Some weeks have passed already. It's suddenly become super urgent this afternoon. And it's not going to take until the end of the geotechnical work is done to have concluded how the buyout process works.
Okay. Do we have a sense of how long the period after the geotech is? If all those numbers are sorted out and funding's aligned, what is the process from there to concluding buyouts and letting people move on with their lives?
I don't know that as yet. I hesitate to put a timeline on that. I would like to tell you it would be measured in small numbers of months rather than big numbers of months, but I couldn't put my hand on my heart and tell you that. Again, if I reflect back on central government announcements, Minister Robertson, if I remember correctly, has said that he wants it all done within a year.
Yeah, okay. So let's switch over to the Y2s, the ones where, well, in fact, it could be any of them really, where there's potentially remedial work that could be done on the slip zones to protect houses. To the layperson, that could be mammoth projects, where we can imagine huge constructions along under the cliffs on Motukara Road. Are we talking about any situations where homeowners will be stuck in this period of having to rent and pay mortgages for many years while construction is done on sites? Is that a possibility?
It rather depends on whether those are feasible outcomes. It's not likely that that will be feasible for many of the cases in Muriwai, but in the places where it is feasible, there are temporary solutions that can be put in to make it safe while the work is happening. So there are options. One that was used commonly in Christchurch was getting a container, filling it with rocks and using that as a barrier behind the house while the major works happened. So there are options to allow people back into their homes in a temporary way while the permanent fix is put in place.
That sounds like a really rough way to live.
Yes, it is, and it comes down to whether it's viable for the people, for the way you want to live, and financially as well.
But we're not going to get much of a choice in that situation.
I think until we've got the full results of the geotech, it would be too early to say.
Okay.
I think we're really conscious that there's a considerable amount of construction work to be done in Muriwai over the coming years, if I'm frank. You know, homes that need to be repaired, geotechnical work, road work, and other types of work. We're in the process of looking for an appropriately experienced construction project manager who can help with this. Particularly from the perspective of minimising disruption. I mean, nobody wants the road outside their home fixing and then 2 months elapse and then a whole bunch of other stuff happens which is geotechnical in the same place, and then 2 more months elapse and then the power company comes back to the same place and puts out a bunch of cones and fixes the power. So we're just about to take on someone who can try and coordinate all of that and minimise the disruption over the coming years of the construction.
Thank you for that. That notion of it taking years, I think, is this is perhaps the first time we've heard that. In our timelines, we see August, we see a little bit of post-August, but we don't see years. We've not heard years before. So this will lead to questions for Minister Wood around accommodation payments, because that is obviously a major challenge for us to get to.
I think one of the things that we all face is insurance. Insurance doesn't happen quickly, so some of the solutions that we're talking about, particularly around sort of residential geotechnical work that needs to be done, retaining walls, residential construction work, repair work, you're in a conversation here with insurers to get that stuff done, for the funds to get that stuff done, and that's a big part of your timescale that I don't imagine all the insurers are going to have come to the conclusions that they need to by August.
Yeah, okay, so moving on to some of the other groups, say the yellow 2 groups, for example, which we have been hoping for a while could be fast ones to turn around and not have to wait right through to August. Now, I've read in the newsletter there are some efforts being made to do something about accelerating that. Is there any comments you can make around how that's going?
I'm standing right here, Will.
In that case, I'll be careful what I say. Yes, so in the newsletter we published last week, it showed 2 narrowed down zones, a brown zone and a purple zone. The purple zones are those properties where, based on the results of the mapping that was completed about a week and a half ago, and some of the early indications from the geotech work, we felt that the risk was relatively lower, and so we were able to fast track those properties, and they are being assessed at the moment. We said at the time of the newsletter that it would take about 4 weeks to work through those, and we're on track with that. For the other properties in the brown area, there is still too much risk. There's too much uncertainty around the slopes around there. And I've seen some preliminary models that show that the landslides that have occurred could occur all the way around the scarps. And so if you imagine that in what you've seen happening in other places, it could easily affect any of those properties in the brown area. And that's why we need to make sure we've got the final results before we reassess those ones, because we want to get it right, get it the first time right.
So apart from the areas that you've marked as blue at the moment, which we used to fondly call the yellow 2s, will we find there are other areas like that we can uncover? Once you've dealt with those blue areas, do you think there are any others that might bubble to the surface as earlier candidates for deeper analysis?
It's unlikely, because we've got to the stage now where we've collected all that site data and started assessing it, and so there's not much new information coming in between now and August. But we will keep looking. Every week we look again, we reassess, and we look for ones that we can bring forward, because we want to get as many people back into their homes as early as possible. So we will keep looking, but I don't think there's going to be any big changes from here.
Thank you. So going to another area, which is around water. So many of us have seen an incredible amount of water in our land, which we've never seen before. We've had houses that have had flood impact that's never happened in history of those residents living there. We've got water courses that have shifted considerably, causing new damage. There have been questions asked by the community around what the scope is of the investigation that GHD is doing. Does it include deep understanding of the hydrology and the changing of the water courses, or is it more just around land and soil and rocks?
It covers both. So the work that we're talking about here, and I've talked about so far, is purely the geotechnical side, and that's the bit which has the August deadline. But they're also looking at how the hydrology has changed, where the water is moving through the catchment, and how we can deal with the problems that those changes have caused in the future. So short-term management options and potentially long-term management options, and this feeds into the message that Matt gave earlier about works that might be needed in the future.
Great to hear all about those works. Can I just add one more piece to that, right? So we've got a reservoir that was historically up Mototara Road, which has been destroyed by the slips, and Watercare's doing something with it. But we understand it's fed from an aquifer, and there's a constant flow of water involved there that basically never stops. So we're kind of really interested in how's that impacting things as well, and what does it mean in terms of works to resolve this stuff?
I can't speak to the reservoir, I might let Ross try that in a second. But coming back to your previous question about overland flow paths having moved, and there's a couple of spots in particular, I'm not going to try and name and identify them, but we're aware of them, where that's a real problem at the moment, that new overland flow paths doing stuff that's weird and different and is not cool. On face value, you would think that would be easy to deal with, and it is potentially from an engineering perspective, but you quickly get into private property rights, and we can bring all the diggers and stuff here that we like, but we can't just track into people's private property and fix overland flow paths that have moved. However, in some instances we can. We've got transitional powers that are available to us to actually enter private property and deal with stuff that's a safety risk or a risk to life and limb. And there's a couple of spots where we're thinking about doing that now here in Muriwai, using those powers to get into private property and fix some of that stuff.
Right. And yes, to follow on with the reservoirs, Watercare are doing a lot of work to repair the reservoir and also looking at other ways to tap into that water. I don't know quite where they've got to. I haven't had an update in the last week or so, but that work is ongoing.
Yeah, and that leads on to stability of Mototara Road. There's a few spots where water is bubbling up through the tar seal under certain circumstances. And when we think about the stability of the road and remediation on that and how that's going to impact things, we can imagine a situation where Mototara Road should be open to relieve the pressure on Waitea Road, which is open to the public from tomorrow. However, when you look at this kind of risk to road stability that we can see that's evident, are we thinking there might be some major roadworks to expect on Mototara in the next few months?
Potentially. It is being looked at. We know that there's going to be increased maintenance needs along the road for quite some time because of the silt coming onto the surface and because of the water flowing to the ground underneath the road. Hopefully things will start to dry out and that will reduce over time, but there's things we can do in the meantime to reduce the impacts. So we're looking into what they are. It's a little bit challenging because the volumes we're dealing with are quite significant, so it's not an easy fix, but we're getting the best advice we can to do that, and we'll be looking at short-term fixes and the long-term as well.
So that raises the tricky question of how long are we going to see the public traffic coming down Waitea Road without being able to come down Mototara? Are we going to be hitting Christmas? The summer, of course, is going to be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And kia ora mai tātou, everyone. Good to be here in this facility. Fond memories of it. In terms of what we're doing, Auckland Transport is getting advice also from GHD, so it's very integrated advice in terms of the geotechnical and geological stability of Mototara Road. I also just wanted to cover off before I answer the question that Claire's waiting for, is that the confined aquifer that where people on the reticulated water supply comes from is not the shallow aquifer, so the confined aquifer is quite separate, and that shallow aquifer is the one causing the problems.
Yes.
So that super saturated ground that we've had from the extreme weather events. So in terms of Mototara Road, we have some works commencing with the cooperation of landowners where there's debris in people's homes, in trees and hung up, to remove those over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I would hope that we'll be able to have transport back down Mototara Road in that time and monitor the stability. Auckland Transport are comfortable and confident that the road has integrity to take those sorts of transport. Get trucks off Waitea Road as much as possible, and the high volumes of traffic as well. Obviously, we'll monitor the road and make sure that's right. In the meantime, I'd also say that we've but have contingencies in place in the case of emergency to use Mototara Road, particularly for emergency service vehicles in the end of the way, so that we can, or emergency services and first responders can actually attend to incidents that might be there, or in the case of egress from Muriwai and an emergency, which I don't want to see, that roading option is open.
That's great. I mean, that's probably our number one concern, is that emergency services would be unable to get to where they need to go up the narrow road at Waitea. Okay.
Can I just reiterate, you said in 2 or 3 weeks, the road, Mototara Road would be open.
That's our target, is to remove the debris that's creating the risk on Mototara, or not enabling Mototara Road to be
And it
open.
would be open.
We'll be in a position to make that.
2 or 3 weeks.
We'll be in a position to make a decision
Make
in
a
2 or 3 weeks.
decision in 2 or 3 weeks. Okay.
Thank you.
That's, I wanted that clear.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
Before we move on, I would just like to highlight that the geotechnical investigations are scheduled to start in late June and go through July. Some of that will happen on Mototara Road, so assuming that Mototara Road does happen on track, there may still be some works happening in that area that may cause some delays in that. So we'll try and minimise that as much as possible. I just want to make sure that's good.
Well, it's a mixed blessing for us, because we're not sure we want people coming down Mototara Road, but thank you for that. The other question we had was around the borehole, or what layperson's approach, the boring that the GHD team need to do. We've seen it published that they're only going to do it on council land, not on private land. Is that sufficient, or does it only give a rough idea of what's really going on? Do you need access to private land to get a better sample?
That follows on very nicely from the previous comments about the ground investigation. So yes, we're confident that the best results are actually probably from the public land, mainly in the roads themselves. There's a few good reasons for that. Firstly, we're going to be using them as monitoring points in the long run, so we want to make sure that they're available so that we can maintain them. And if they're in private land, that becomes a lot harder. The good thing that we've seen in Muriwai is that the geology is relatively consistent. In many places, geology is very, very variable, and you can get big changes over short distances between sort of 50 metres. It can be quite different. In Muriwai, it's not like that. So what we need to do is get this overall picture, and the spacings of boreholes, looking at about 6 boreholes, gives us that information. So it should be a really good, clear picture that we get from this, and it will not be a problem to not have access to private land.
Okay, that's great. So, thinking about Awaya Road, thinking about what happens above, because we're mainly living below, we're looking at Mototara, living in Domain, and we've seen a lot of water come down from Awaya Road, and we all look up there and we think, where's it coming from? Like, whose water is this? And there's certain points on the road where we look at it and we wonder about whether there's anything else that can be done to improve that in the future. Is there anything on the cards for Awaya?
So I talked about the GHD work earlier. They are looking at the catchment-wide water flow, and they will be looking at Awaya Road as part of that to see if there's anything up there that is causing a problem that can be changed and that can minimise the risk further down the hill.
You are aware that the coroner found that in 1956 that the council was partly responsible for that slip. You're aware of that?
Yeah.
So the water coming off Muriwai Road is a big issue.
Yes, the water coming from Awaya Road is a huge issue. So drilling into the question around private land versus council land for doing the geotech boring. So presumably more land will become council land at some point. Does that create an opportunity to get better data?
The reason we're collecting this data is so that we can make the decisions around which properties should be category 3 and which properties should not. So there isn't much point getting data after that decision has been made. But I'm confident that the data we get will be really good quality and will be exactly what's needed to give the confidence that the decisions are right. So I don't think that's necessary.
Was company union on that?
Apologies, I will talk a bit louder into this one. I was saying that there won't be a need, in my opinion, to do further geotechnical work after decisions have been made about which properties are Category 3 and which properties are not Category 3. The information we're collecting should be plenty accurate enough for that decision, and further investigations later wouldn't add any value.
So the later is after August.
Okay, so the minister has just
I
arrived.
think so, there was a white card, but I can't find it.
Potentially. Shall we take a small number of questions
Yes,
from the community? Okay.
I'll hold him at the door.
One over here. I'll just sit over here.
Just a question, if Movatara is going to be, all things going well, open in 3 weeks, why don't you just open the cordons then for both, rather than opening tomorrow for Waitea, which is, in my view, creating a massive risk and safety and health-wise to the community, but also to anyone who decides to come and visit. I can't understand why you wouldn't do that if it's only 3 weeks away.
So we have made that assessment against the criteria that we have with Auckland Transport, and it's our view that with the safety measures in place to reduce speed limits, that down, well, those reduced speed limits, we hope people follow those and are respectful and take care. So we have to balance the multiple views that we have in Muriwai and across the region to come to a place that people love and are able to visit, and that freedom of movement issue is critical in those decisions. But I understand the comment and empathise.
What are the other safety measures other than the 30 kilometres? You said there were other safety.
Sorry, the question there was what are the other safety measures that have to be put in place before?
Well, for people to access the
Yeah.
road tomorrow, you just said there were other.
So there will be some no stopping, so making sure the road corridor is open, so that Auckland Transport is the roading authority managing that.
Does that mean no stopping at Māori Bay? Is it?
No stopping down Waitea Road.
What about all the residents that park their cars on the side of the road?
Yeah, I understand that, so there'll be a discretion, but that's one of the reasons why, and I understand where things are coming from. We see trucks also, following those lower speed limits. Coming down today, there were trucks going up that I've experienced. But we have that. We do have Auckland Transport are confident that that's a safe road to use from a traffic safety management point of view.
Will residents on Waitea Road run the risk of being ticketed for parking on the road?
No, there'll be discretion around that type of thing. So I can give you assurance around that. If there's any problems, you let me know.
We will let you know.
What are the conditions under which you might reconsider that decision if it proves to not be safe? What would the things be like? Would it be accidents and blocking access? What would need to happen in order for us to say this is not enough, this is not acceptable?
Yeah, so certainly monitor that in terms of traffic safety and in terms of the safety to the community as well. So that we do need to balance that against the other views that are in the community of opening things up. We have a lot of people coming into the community already for the golf course, for businesses, for the campground, for other concessions. So we have quite a lot of traffic there already. We do have the benefit that it is winter time, other than we know people will want to come back to Muriwai. We understand that's a challenge, but there is that freedom of the cordons being opened up, freedom of movement rights as well for other people. So it is a balance, and that balance is reached a point where we believe that can be.
So even if we were to see a spate of accidents, that wouldn't retract the decision?
Definitely we would take that into account and act quickly. That's
right. You mentioned transitional powers. Could you briefly outline what they are? And would you tell us when they will come to an end? Thank you.
So when we're in this period, the transition/recovery period, the group manager, in this case me, the group recovery manager, and the deputy group recovery manager have certain regulatory powers that we can use should we need to. And actually the cordons are an example of that. So the fact that the cordons are there, they've been put in place using the transitional powers. The other sort of key examples of what the powers allow us to do, should we need to, and there needs to be a good reason to do this stuff, right? We don't use these powers lightly. We can enter private property if there's a risk to public safety or public well-being coming from private property. So I talked about that example earlier on. I've just talked about cordons, so we can prohibit access to places if we think there's a risk to public safety or well-being. So that's your cordon example. Probably the other key thing that we can do, should we need to, is I'm trying to think of the right word, sequester. I don't like to use the word demand, but we can sequester information from whoever we feel we need information from, individuals, government departments, businesses. Again, if we need information with respect to sort of public safety and well-being. So those would be the key things that we can do, and the key powers that we can use in this situation. How long do they run for? They're on a rolling monthly cycle. So we've just renewed the powers for a month, or the mayor has renewed the powers, so we need the mayor to sign off the use of these powers, and that rolls from month to month. So every month we need to talk to the mayor and ask him whether he'll renew the powers and make a proposal to him, in fact, as to whether we need to keep them for another month.
So do you expect them to go, for a few months or years or what?
I expect them to keep rolling for a few more months, yes, I do. If I think back to Kaikoura, they kept the transitional powers rolling for many months after they moved into recovery to get bits and bobs done when they needed to. So yes, I think we will continue to roll them over for a few more months.
And just quickly, are the placards part of that arise from that power? Do the placards arise from that power?
No, the placards are a different process.
Right, I'm just going to, got one quick question here for Ross. My understanding was that there was going to be some varying of sensors that you guys were going to be doing to detect land movement. I want to have those in, and has recent rain shown anything on that? Can you give us a quick update on that?
Sure, yes. So what we're doing is putting piezometers which measure groundwater, and they're going to go into the boreholes. So first of all, we need to drill those boreholes, which starts in late June and through July, and then we install those piezometers into those holes, and they will be reporting back every 10 minutes what the groundwater levels are. So we'll be able to get a much better understanding of the water that's been talked about earlier, how it's flowing through the ground, what the pressures are like, and what that means for the soil. But no, they've not been installed yet.
Great, thanks Ross. And so now, the long-awaited arrival of the Honourable Michael Woods, who's here in his capacity as Minister for Auckland. So he's had a truly typical Auckland traffic experience on his way here. Mr. Wood.
Kia ora koutou katoa, and good afternoon everyone. Again, apologies that I have been a little late coming through on that northwestern motorway that you're also familiar with, but good to be here with you today. Can I just first start by acknowledging Claire and the group for convening this gathering, but also for the ongoing work that you've been doing to support local residents at what I know continues to be an enormously challenging time, and a time that has become wearying for you as you've been dealing with the uncertainty of recent months, and having community leadership does make a difference there, but also clear for the direct and clear way and constructive way in which you have continued to communicate through council and central government about the issues here. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I acknowledge MPs who are here, local MP Chris Peck, who's outside on the other side of the window, but hello Chris, and Vanushi Walters, our Labour MP for Upper Harbour as well as council colleagues who are here as well. I remember when I came here, we had our last meeting here in March, and it was really important for me to say at that time, and it continues to be important as we work through these issues, that we do need to work through the issues, but there shouldn't be and there can't be politics in the way that we deal with this. So the approach that we take as a government is to work with our partners at Auckland Council and work constructively with MPs, no matter what party it is, to make sure that we're all dealing with good information and making good decisions and trying to help you as quickly as we can. I thought, I don't want to repeat a whole lot of the discussion that you might have already had with Matt, Mace, Ross and the Auckland Council team. So I thought I might just do two things and then really happy to take questions, feedback that you want to provide to me. The first is just to outline the particular steps that central government has been working through over recent months since we last met, because there are different roles here for central government and for local government. And then just to speak briefly to a couple of the key issues that, Claire, you have channeled through to us that I know are top of mind for some people who might be here. So when we last met, that was at the point where, I think it was pretty much on the day of, or perhaps the day before, the government had just publicly confirmed the categorisation system, which you are now as familiar and probably experts in more than anyone else. So providing a framework for how we can move forward for your community and other communities right across the North Island who have been severely impacted. And that was a really important first step, because without some kind of a framework, there would be no ability to actually make decisions that give people certainty going forward. So that was the first thing there. Alongside that, at that time we had the work of the task force that was led by Sir Brian Roach. That work largely made its way through over the course of April and May, and is a really important input into this exercise. That work has brought together information available from councils and critically from insurers to give a good base of information to support councils with their decision making. So that was the other key thing we did at that stage. And then really May for central government was about making other key decisions that enable the process to move forward. So pretty early on the piece we said that the 31st of May was the point by which we would set ourselves the need to make clear decisions about how we would engage as central government in this process. And we specifically asked that councils prepare themselves to take the next steps in early June. And that is what is now happening. The critical decision, of course, that we made at the end of May is that the government will financially support a buyout process for Category 3 homes. And what we heard consistently from this community and from other communities, for those of you who are amongst the worst affected, and I know particularly in Muriwai, you have amongst the largest number of severely affected homes in this community in one place, very close together, that getting to that point of knowing that there will be a buyout process supported by the Crown is a really important one. So for us, getting to that point and publicly confirming it was an enormously important one. We also made some decisions in the course of the budget that will feed into this process as well. So there's a $100 million fund which is set up in the budget to enable co-funding proposals working with councils to do remedial works, which will probably more apply to areas which are in Category 2 as well. So basically through that money, we've put in place that overall policy framework, made the call that government will support with councils a buyout process and set that in train as well. What we've now started doing is getting into the detailed discussions with council around how that buyout process will work. So we've been really clear from the beginning that we want this to be a locally led process. We don't want this to be a process where central government comes into every local community and makes all of the decisions. We want this to be locally led, and that's why it's so important that we're there with council as partners. So council will make the decisions around categorisation based on their knowledge and their role within the system, and it will be council who carries out the process of buyouts with financial support from government. Over the next few weeks we will be working through in detail with councils how that buyout will actually be structured. What will be the cost share? How will that be spread across central government, local government and homeowners? Questions around how we approach issues of homes which are insured or not insured within that, and critically how we work out the valuation methodology, which will obviously be really important if you're one of those houses which is in Category 3 and is looking at a buyout. Now we do not expect that to be a process that will extend out, and I just want to be really clear, we don't want that negotiation with councils, so we're doing it with Auckland here, but also with other councils around the country. We do not want that negotiation process to be a factor in delaying anything, and it will not be. We will be working through that at pace over the next few weeks, and so it is our full expectation that that will be clarified well in time for the final categorisation decisions to be made in this community and others. So it's important, but please don't feel worried that that part will hold up any decisions being made that are important for you and your family. So that probably just covers off the key things that we've been working on since we last met. The second thing I wanted to touch on is some of the key issues that have been fed through, and really what I've been hearing from the information supplied to me from Claire, but also from others in the community, is that while this gets worked out over the next few months, and Auckland Council have given that indication of geotech work being done by August, there's still a bit of a gap there. There's still a gap of several months, which is really challenging, particularly if you're amongst the worst affected. And so what I think we need to be doing, and this is a part of today, is working with you and listening to you about the things that we can do to help you get through what is going to be an ongoing challenging period before you get that final certainty. So that's what we're really keen to hone in on now. We do know that for a number of people, particularly where you're in temporary accommodation, some of you are getting to the point where you're getting quite rightly concerned and worried about how you're going to pay for that in the coming months. So we do want to talk with you more about that. We have that issue has been registered, and we have asked officials to do work for ministers to start giving us some further advice around that area. So we're keen to hear more from you to really get to grips with that issue and that problem, so that we can do whatever we reasonably can to provide certainty within that period. Again, I want to acknowledge Claire and the group. You've done some really helpful work, which I've read in preparation for this meeting, which is sort of case study for situations for some people within this community. We will make sure that we take that into account as we're developing up that policy advice to think about how we can further help. And as we do that, we'll be thinking about this community, but also other communities around the country who are experiencing similar issues. So I think with that, I'll probably leave it there. That's a run through of what we've been doing, and just I guess a bit of reflection back of some of the key issues that we've been hearing. Again, I'll just finish by noting that we know that 5 months into this event, that remains extraordinarily challenging for many of you, and not just at an individual level with your own homes, but actually for the whole community. And I would acknowledge that it's probably this community more than any others where there's been a substantial impact right across the whole community rather than sort of individual households dotted throughout. So I know that is really tough. I admire the way in which you are hanging in there together. I want to give you that ongoing assurance that we will continue to walk along with you and provide the support that you need to rebuild individually, but also as a whole community. So again, I'll just thank and acknowledge Claire and the team. I'll just also acknowledge the other person I have with me. We have Dr. Jin Russell with me. Jin is a part of my Tamaki Makaurau Leadership Advisory Group. So along with a number of other people who'll be well known to you, for example, Bob Harvey, who's on the group, and Penny Hulse. These are some of the Aucklanders with significant expertise in mana who are helping, advising and supporting me and government as we work through some of these issues so that we can help you. So thank you everyone, and very happy now to take your questions and feedback. Noreira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Great, thank you, Minister. That's very useful. Before we get to questions from the floor, there are some common questions that we have collated, and we are going to ask Mike once again to address those to the Minister so that he can answer questions that are likely to be on the top of your, or the tip of your tongue as well. And then there will be time for questions from the floor, but I am going to control and moderate that so that we get short questions, not statements, and everybody gets a chance to ask the questions that they have. Mike.
Thank you, Minister Wood, for coming along. So we've talked with the council before you got here around the timelines for funding, whether it will impact, whether there's a deadline where we know that funding agreements will be made between the council and central government. Your comment about the involvement of insurance companies is a really interesting one for us, because the bulk of the houses that are red stickered and yellow stickered or Y2 stickered, they don't have any house claims. The houses aren't damaged, and so there isn't a great role for insurance on the surface of it to cover any of those costs. Are the insurance companies involved in any way with the buyout funding for Category 3 properties where their houses are not damaged, or is that just out of the picture completely?
That is one of the detailed issues that we will be working through. That is my general expectation that they will be involved in that. We obviously have situations like the one that you have just described, and probably more here in Muriwai and the other West Coast communities than anywhere else, where it is possible that we will end up with some Category 3 homes where there has not actually been any substantial damage as a result of the events, and therefore there has been no insurance payout. So I think there are probably two important things for me to communicate here. The first is that wherever we land with that, it will not affect the outcome for you in terms of there being a buyout. If your property ends up being categorised as a Category 3 property, we as government have said that we will financially support a council-led buyout of that property. Now within that, we're going to have to work through what happens with insurance, how the proceeds get managed within that. But ultimately, if you're a Category 3 property, there will be a buyout process. One of the specific things that we have flagged up that we will need to include as a part of the negotiations is the question of where there has been damage, the properties that had insurance versus properties that did not have insurance, and how we manage that difference. So I just want to flag up that as something that we want to manage.
No, we're just going to do questions. We will come to questions from the
This is
floor.
very relevant. The $100 million fund of the remedial and the buyout Category 3 is the $100 million fund remedial. That's not the buyout of Category 3 undamaged homes, right? There are
Yes,
two-
I'll just repeat the question so everyone can hear it. So I mentioned in my opening comments that in the budget we've established a $100 million fund. And the question was, does that go towards a buyout or is it something different? So it's something different. So that $100 million fund will be there to basically work with councils who might be developing up proposals. It might be for here, or it might be for flood remediation proposals, to co-fund interventions that will make it safe for people to live in those areas. It is a completely separate funding source from the funding that we will need for the buyout of properties in Category 3.
So leading on from that, in talking with the council earlier, we did explore timelines that could involve years, not months. So when you think about your comment around, an optimistic comment around a few months, the council has alluded to potentially being years before some people are able to be safely back in their homes as normal. So coming back to that question of rent and paying rent while you pay mortgages, and you know, we've got a delicate relationship with our banks because our properties are security behind our mortgages. We have to keep going and going and going. We can't stop paying our mortgages. It's not really an option, given a bit of variability there. So we really want to understand what is actually going to happen with continuing the kind of levels of rent payments that we have. In the data that you've been given, previously the average rents are around $800 a week per household for our families. That's a lot of money, and it'll go on for a long time, and we won't have insurance coverage. So I'd love to know more about that, and I want some certainty, because this has been a front and centre topic since February. We've raised it with the task force. It's definitely been raised up to central government. I know the council's done their job trying to raise this issue as well. So we're a little bit surprised that you're just starting to work this out with the relevant ministers.
Okay, thank you, Mike. There's a couple of things I'll touch on there. There's a role here for government, and I think there is a role here for the banks as well. Some of the information that I've seen coming through indicates that some people have had success and support in terms of banks assisting through this period, and some people haven't. That is something that I would like to go back and have a good look into, because our expectation is that in these sorts of situations we do have a reasonable level of support from banks to households who do need a little bit of extra rope to get through these difficult times. I don't think the largest corporations in the country in these situations should be entirely off the hook there. Secondly, there's a question of the ongoing support that we provide. There obviously has been significant support that's been provided through TAS and other mechanisms to assist people through this period. What you're alluding to is that for those people particularly who have been living in a property because they've had to move out, perhaps where they have had insurance proceeds, you're getting to a point where that's likely to be exhausted. So really I can't give you the specific answer to what will be provided for that, but I just want to really clearly communicate that issue is very much there in front of us at the moment. We understand that that's been an issue that you have communicated previously. What we have been advised by people in this community and others, that it's in the coming months that begins to become a material issue. So for most people up until this point, there has been that support coming through from their insurers. I guess we want to be, there are all sorts of challenges for us as we work our way through these processes. One of them has been that we want to make sure that other players, including insurers, are stepping up to the mark and providing the sort of support they should provide to households, and we want to make sure that has been happening. But we recognise that we will be getting to a point in the coming months where for some people that will come towards the end. So that is why,
July.
and I've been in communications with my colleagues over recent days as this issue has been elevated through to me. We are accelerating advice coming through to me. I've had conversations with officials over the last 48 hours to be really clear that this is a significant issue that's coming at us and will affect some of you, and it is one that we want to support you on.
That's very reassuring. We are running out of money in the next few weeks. Like some people are running out in July, so it's coming out really quickly. Now it has been highlighted to us looking in legislative archives that in the Christchurch context there was legislation in place that covered rental costs for people. It wasn't means tested, it was completely different to the offering from TAS and MSD today, which really are not suited to this purpose. Are you aware of the older legislation that covered this during the Christchurch situation?
Yes, I am. So I've received correspondence both from yourselves, Deborah Russell, who doesn't represent this area but represents other communities on the coast who have been affected, has written to me and pointed this out to me. So effectively there's a spectrum of options around how support can be provided in these situations. What officials will be working up for us very soon are options for ministers to consider. So we get that it's important. That's something I'm hearing very clearly from this meeting. This is important and becoming more urgent, and it's something that I will undertake to go back and make sure we provide certainty as soon as possible. And we're certainly aware that has been a model that has been used in the past, and there have been other models that could be applied potentially too.
That's great. And one thing that the community doesn't want to keep hearing is finger pointing to other organisations to solve the problem. There is a role for the banks, there is a role for insurance. However, what we have is a front and central mental health issue with not knowing how our futures will pan out. The people who have the words, insolvency running through their minds. There's people in our community that have suffered heart attacks. And what we're hearing from central government is something around who can be blamed for not contributing enough. And it isn't really helpful to the community. We would like to hear that tone change.
Yeah, happy to respond to that, Mike, and that is certainly not the way that we want this to be. Our approach consistently through this is that there is a critical role for central government here. That, for example, is why we made that big call last month that we are going to be funding with local government a buyout process. That is likely to be an enormous financial contribution, so we know that central government needs to step up and provide support, particularly to those who are the worst affected. We don't step back though from saying this isn't about pointing or blaming anyone. This does need to be a shared way of supporting the community. There's a critical role for central government, there's a critical role for local government, there's a critical role for those big institutions, be it insurers and bankers. We need to make sure that everyone is at the table in the delivery of those solutions, and it doesn't just get shot back in one direction. So please don't take that to be me or anyone else saying that central government isn't going to be here in this, but we do need to have those other players at the table, and I think that will actually lead to better outcomes for you if everyone is playing their part.
So buyout is buyout of damaged places and buyout of undamaged places, but with a list at the top. Is that going to be, are they going to be anchored in two different categories? Is one first and one second?
Yeah.
So
So the buyout process will be led by local government. It's here in Auckland and in other places. So it will be them who's engaging with you around it. What they have local government has indicated in the communications that some of you will have received, is that within that, and bear in mind we're dealing with a large number of properties here. So across Auckland, the categorisation has not been done, but hundreds of properties in Category 3 and potentially thousands within Category 2. There will be some prioritisation within that. So Council has indicated that it will look to work with and provide certainty as quickly as it can to those who are the worst affected initially. I think that's a fair and reasonable approach. So the question is, have we given Council a deadline on this? And the answer to that is no. This is a locally led process, and we do need to let each council make the right decisions here. There's a real tension in this, which I totally understand. Everyone who's affected, and I totally get this, my friends in my own community of Mount Ross School are in similar situations to you. People, of course, want certainty as quickly as possible. Council's also got to make the right decisions and not get a categorisation decision wrong for a household or a street or a whole community. So that is the process they're working through here, mainly led by a geotech process, which I said will come through by August. So no, we're not going to put a deadline on that, but central government's expectation is that this is expedited as much as it possibly can. We believe it is incredibly important that the process moves forward as quickly as it can to get to a state of certainty for you that can stand up. So that is the way in which we will engage with Auckland Council. It might be to set a deadline that's arbitrary, but it will be to positively encourage and support to get to those outcomes as quickly as they can be gotten to.
Has there been anything decided about the future of insurance in places like Muriwai? So, for example, if houses are remediated or the land is remediated, so people move back into their homes, what does that mean to being insured in the future? Has anything been decided about changes in the way insurance will be managed?
Yeah, not at a policy level, but that will need to be an ongoing engagement with the insurance sector. And I think that will, one of the key reasons we set up the task force was to make sure that we were beginning that work, particularly with the insurance sector, because they play a massive role in this. They play a massive role right now in terms of your ability to recover by supporting you along with the council and government. But they play a massive role in terms of what will happen next, where they are prepared to insure, what it costs to insure, the kind of signals that they send through the way that they price about insurance right across the country. And this is going to be a very big thing for New Zealand as a whole. We're now in an era where we are having more of these sorts of events, and it will have an impact in terms of the way that insurers choose to go about their business, and probably to everyone. So no, there's not a specific answer to that at this point. There'll obviously be individual discussions, homeowner to insurer, and there will be a higher level discussion with them, but that will probably take place over the coming months.
Great, thank you for that. I think we'll switch to a few community questions.
Yeah. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have already asked a question, either of the Minister or the Council, I'd like you to give other people in the audience an opportunity to ask questions. We'll either bring the microphone to you, or if you shout it out to me, I'll go. At the back.
Minister, in your comments about the split of the costs between central government and council that you indicated would be underway in the next few weeks, you also alluded to a contribution by homeowners. And I've heard that referred to before. I wonder if you could explain just what you mean by that, because as a homeowner, I'm sure we're all concerned as to just what that might entail.
Did everybody hear that question?
Yeah.
Good.
It's good and clear. Now, thank you for the question. Happy to address that. What we're dealing with in this situation is a big issue across a large number of communities where there isn't a specific precedent for how we do this. We have had over recent years a number of different communities where this has been dealt with in different ways. So, for example, in Matata, after severe flooding in that community, there was a buyout process which was, from memory, split a third between district council, the regional council and central government. In Westport there was a different way of doing it between central government and local government, something different again in Christchurch. So we don't kind of have a specific rule book for how we do this. What we've said we want to work through as a part of the negotiation is to make sure that we get something that is coherent and that is fair all around. And so the purpose of the negotiation is to land what that should be. We wanted to signal up front that that is a part of the discussion, but there is not a predetermined outcome for that. The other thing I will just underscore with that, just to be very, very clear, because I know it's important for all of you, is that this has to be something that's sustainable and can be carried by homeowners. We know that you're all under a significant burden at the moment. We want you to be able to move on. So there is no way that central government would come out of this process putting a burden on homeowners that is going to not be manageable by you.
Thank you, Minister. Maria.
Speaking about manageable burdens and the subject of the temporary accommodation problem that we're very soon facing in July, there are a lot of very desperate people who are becoming increasingly desperate as the days go on. Can you give us an assurance that you won't put the entire burden of the extra accommodation costs on the displaced residents from July?
Thank you. So the question, just for the back, if anyone didn't hear it, to summarise, was seeking assurance that the full burden of those accommodation costs for people who are coming towards the end of their insurance was going to be supported. The people aren't going to have to carry all at the end of July if it's going to cause them real problems. We don't want you to be in that situation. So that's why I say we're getting advice and options through very quickly around this. I have to stand here and be honest tonight and say I can't give you the specific answer as what it would be today, because we've got to get the advice and the options.
There is a legislative framework that could be reactivated overnight and solve that problem in a way that was acceptable to government in 2011. So there's no impediment to solving the problem quickly. It is a lack of political will that is causing that to be still a problem for displaced residents.
As I say, we are getting the advice through. We'll make sure we look at the options and try and arrive at something that is fair and is able to support you as you deal with a difficult situation. I have received the advice and the letter through from the group which identifies that there are different situations for different people here, and probably the most urgent are those who are getting to a point in July where you might be running out of that support. So if I can just please let you know that I've heard you today. For me, a personal commitment that we will progress work on this as quickly as we can to try and get that certainty.
We'll stay in touch with you, Minister. More questions? Yes. Caroline.
Minister, firstly, thank you for coming and your time here. And also, the last time you came, you did give us an assurance of sorting things out by a certain date, and as a government, you did follow through on that. And I want to acknowledge that, because timelines are so crucial to us for our mental health and for our financial management. In the interim, whilst we've been waiting, we look at the precedent for events like this around New Zealand. We look at Matata, we look at Kaikoura, Port Hills, Christchurch. These events took like a decade to resolve. So what is it that you know or you understand at this point that indicates that we won't be on a 10-year journey, or approximately so?
Look, we just have an absolute determination that there is certainty for you as soon as possible. So we've been working with the Auckland Council, and obviously now we have indications of when those initial categorisation decisions, categorisation indicative decisions will come forward to you. That is the critical first step, and that gives us something to work on. And then in terms of those people who will be in a buyout situation, there will then need to be an engagement and a process between you and the council. Now, how that goes will depend a little bit on the particular dynamics of that. But we as central government are really clear, we do not want this to be something that drags out. That is about your well-being as homeowners. It is also about how whole communities move forward. So our expectation is that specifically a buyout process that we will be contributing money into at a very substantial level across the country moves forward with some real speed. The question here was, could that be done within a year? I will never ever be able to stand here and say I can account for every individual situation. Someone might disagree with a categorisation decision or disagree with a valuation decision, and we'll need to give a fair process for that to be worked through. But I would sincerely hope that within a year there is significant progress, and most people are able to, in a buyout situation, know what's happening and be able to move forward.
Perhaps now with your partners in council here, as we've understood tonight, once the GHD reports are here, the backroom discussions about how the formulation of buyouts and valuations will have been done. So with this posse of peeps, can we work out whether we get a categorisation, and if we so choose, that we can go immediately into a buyout process? Is that part of the plan, seeing that the back work has been done?
Okay. I would have to put that more to Auckland Council, because they will be the ones, you know, the rest of my posse of peeps here, I've never been called that before, they will be the ones who will be fronting that.
They've probably been called worse.
Trust me. They will be the ones who will be fronting that with you, so I don't want to step into that. I will just again reiterate from central government's point of view, all along for us this is about making sure that there was momentum in this process. So when we last met, we said we wanted to make decisions as a cabinet within May. We did that. We said that we wanted local government to get underway with its process shortly after that. That is now happening. We're now beginning to get greater certainty. August view in terms of initial geotech discussions. We just need to keep pushing those timeframes forward and putting energy and resource into them, and that we know how important that is.
Right.
Would the posse of peeps like to speak to that at this point?
We might give them an opportunity once the Minister has answered questions. Rosa, did you have a question?
I've got so many questions, but mainly like I just wondered about the red zone area, like by the lodge and across from there, our family home's there, but it still doesn't have a sticker, so I'm just wondering why that is, and probably maybe other people as well, and why we still haven't been allowed any access when obviously both all these roads are opening. What is going on? Like, we've got no contact, no sticker, no nothing, as you know.
Okay, so the
redirection.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel pretty angry and upset to be honest.
A public issue to access the houses that are red stickered there, then will we ever get access?
Yeah.
If, you know?
Yeah.
So this is a property that hasn't been stickered, to which there has been no access allowed because the situation of the home is so precarious, is my understanding. And so the question is, will all of this forge ahead and that situation still stays the same?
Okay. Look, no one should be left behind in this process. What I would like to do in your particular situation, and we can perhaps do it at the end of this meeting, is grab the team here from Auckland Council. I'm sorry, I don't have the specific local knowledge about why that has happened or not happened in your situation, but let's make sure that we get clarity for you, and we will not allow this process to move forward with individuals being left
You
out.
guys seem to be moving like 100 steps forward, you know, and we're kind of like, yeah.
I understand why you're feeling that way.
And there is more than one. There is more than one
Probably a lot
home.
of people that would like.
Yeah, there are more than one home. Is more than one home in Muriwai in that situation. Another question, Greg.
Yeah, just a quick question. I suppose it alludes to what you hear there, is that I think Auckland Council sometimes suffers from the challenge of the quantity, and there's a lot of cracks and we tend to fall through them. And I think what we are facing as a group, and we're hearing great things from central government about helping us, etc. But our question still remains, how does local government, in this case Auckland Council, who are, you know, having budget challenges, etc., and will probably struggle with some of these ideas of how to get around supporting this community. And the experience has been lackluster sometimes, and look, that could be because some of the people have got 200 cases they're dealing with throughout Auckland. So the volume has been challenging, and it's been challenging for insurance companies as well. But we're stuck in the cracks, and I think sometimes it feels like we need central government. So my question is, can central government take control potentially of Auckland if these sort of things fail consistently? Because I think the challenge that we have as a community is believing that Auckland Council can actually navigate this situation, have the resources, have the manpower, have the dollars. So apologies to the team at the front, but experience counts more than words. And at the moment we're banking experience, which has been a fairly mixed and frustrating bag, including the fact that we're opening up tomorrow, and we've got last minute ideas coming through about how we can keep access to Muriwai. So the question is, when or what would trigger you taking over, because we need it?
Look, what we all owe it to you to get things resolved and give you the certainty as soon as possible. We all owe that to you, either it's central government or it's Auckland Council. And what we need to work on is how we make sure that happens as soon as possible. Now, if central government today decided to step in through various powers that we have to remove Auckland Council for the equation, that would slow this down. It would not lead to a quicker outcome for you. So I'm really clear in my mind that the role for us here is to make sure that we are alongside, that we are part of this, and that we are supporting and encouraging Auckland Council to move it forward as quickly as it reasonably can to give you the certainty. And I'll be clear, that's our expectation as well. We've consistently set deadlines that we, as was acknowledged before, we have met in terms of making key decisions. We have dates that are on the table in terms of next steps for you. We will be working with Auckland Council to make sure that those dates get met. We have a responsibility in this, but I think that it's us being there, having a leadership role and supporting Auckland Council that will actually get you the best outcome as quickly as possible.
Okay, so
and the other thing I would just say on that is it's important for us as a government, for me, with my role as Minister for Auckland, it's personally important for me, and I will come back and be happy to front about the ongoing progress so that we can keep in touch and make sure that we are living up to that duty that we owe to you.
That's also going on, and we'll get to you on that, Minister. So at the back. Is it? No, I can't see you in the shadow, but at the back, yes, go.
What I wanted to understand from you, the Minister, because at the moment we've got a certain government that got these elections coming up later, and a lot of this is going to be reliant on the government and still continuing with this work after that happens. So is there commitment across all parties?
Right. Okay, so the question is this bilaterally agreed, this process that we're going through?
So the process that is unfolding at the moment, which involves government committing to financially supporting a buyout process and the categorisation, is something that we have agreed to as the government and as a cabinet. There is not a formal bipartisan or multi-party agreement around that, although our intention is to continue working with other parties around this. We know that what matters for you is as much certainty in this as possible. I've got to say, and I hope this is encouraging, I haven't seen too many signs of politics in this. I think that MPs right across the board recognise that this is bigger than that it's about enabling communities to be able to get back to living their lives. So I don't have a big concern in that space. I can speak to the government of the commitments that we've made. If we return after October, we will continue through with those commitments, including the buyout.
But the amount of $1 billion towards it, that might be injected?
Yeah, I can just, this isn't me having a go at anyone, I can just never speak for what a future or different government would do. I can speak for what we have committed to and give you my assurance that we will continue to honour that. But as I say, I see no signs of this being a politically contentious issue, if that gives you some comfort.
Great. Jane, at the back.
Could you please confirm what you mean by bank support? Is that you think bank support is business only, or you think bank support is a mortgage deferment, or do you think the bank's going to cover me some rent?
Thank you. My comment there is that in the feedback I've received from this community and also other communities, I've seen a variety of response from banks. I've seen some examples of deferment, some examples of interest only, and some examples where people have said the bank hasn't been willing to make any changes. So that is what I mean by that, and that is why I think it is important we go back and have that conversation to make sure that all of the big players in this are providing reasonable support.
I would like to really go on record and say I don't believe support is that I go interest only or I go deferment. That affects me in the long run, and the situation isn't no one's fault, but there should be no exception made for the fact that we should come out of this worse than we went into it. And I don't think that the government should be relying on banks offering us interest only or us going deferment as a problem-solving part of this issue.
Yeah, look, I acknowledge that won't solve all of the problem for people necessarily. It is a tool that some people have found helpful. That's where I leave it with that. And I just think we want to make sure that everyone who can lean in is leaning in to provide assistance.
Right, any further questions? Yes, and second row here.
Minister, is there any sort of future scoping planning of rebuilding of Muriwai? Because there will be houses that will be lost.
Yes, so again, for people who might not have heard the back, the question was really around the future of the community and what there might be by way of a plan for rebuilding the community. And let's be honest here, when at least some houses are lost from the community, because I think we understand that that will be a reality. I'll just start again by saying something I said earlier, that we've got a real recognition that this is not just for you in Muriwai, it's not just an individual homeowner issue. It is that, but it is also about the community that you live in and that you love, and people will be feeling a lot of emotion around it as well. What I know is that this is a close-knit community, and we should be collectively supporting you to rebuild and go on, and we will not walk away from that. Now, the details of how we get there will have to involve a lot of working through. They have to involve questions around land, where it is safe to build, who owns land, and how that happens. So that will have to happen in the next phase, and it will have to be locally led. So again, critical role for Auckland Council here in terms of being the lead planning organisation. But my view as well is that when any community faces a significant change in its circumstances like this, it must also be community led. And I've had similar conversations, for example, with folks in Henderson and parts of West Auckland who are likely facing major changes with homes gone, significant works around the waterways there. And what they have said to me is that they don't want to be in a situation where central government or local government comes in and says, this is how we're going to change your community. They want to be a part of that, and that is what I think we need to work with you on.
So is there any scoping out work for any of that happening at the moment?
I have to pass that to Auckland Council. That would be a piece of work that they would. I don't have anything.
There's a couple of things I can talk to when you finish, Minister. That's up.
Okay. More questions for the Minister? Okay, so maybe I'll just walk this microphone over to Matt.
Let me try and remember what I was going to say. Your question around what areas of Muriwai might look like when the homes have been removed and things are different?
No, past that, will there be rebuilding work? Is there any sort of scoping out of what the next phase could be?
Yeah. So yes and no. So what happens in July, August time is we're going to come to you with our draft recovery plan. So how the recovery plan works for Auckland is there's a regional segment to it which talks about regional wide initiatives and future resilience and so on, and then each of the local areas has a specific section, and we intend to engage with each of the local communities as we produce those sections. So that question you've asked would be something that we would work through with you as a community when we did that consultation exercise in sort of July, August time. What were the other two things? So one was an answer, and I think one's probably a statement from me. Did you ask about
Well, what is the time frame that you're working to? If all the back agreement is done, by the time we get our GHD information, can we go immediately into buyout?
So we're into that stuff already and trying to figure out how that buyout would work. Like everything you've heard us say today, it's not straightforward. There's a similar exercise going on in Hawke's Bay that we need to be conscious of, and conversations with central government around, we don't want to set a precedent and then Hawke's Bay does something different. Anyhow, that sounds like an excuse. It's not. I wouldn't consider what we're doing currently in framing up that stuff to have been a success if we were telling you that your home was in category 3 and then we couldn't begin a conversation with you about what happened next and what that looked like. I think my last point was probably a statement when you were talking about the beeps and our experience, and maybe central government would have to come and help. I'm not a long-term council employee. I haven't just been shuffled from one place to another into this position, if you're talking about previous experience. I was 5 years in Christchurch, a couple of years on the housing recovery programme, and then a couple of years in the infrastructure recovery programme. And I've got all the very best people around me in terms of advice. I was speaking with people from Queensland yesterday. Last week I was in Christchurch meeting other people who went through Christchurch. Roger Sutton, who led CERA, I've been talking with Roger Sutton to get some advice. So we've got all the very best people around us. I think we are relatively experienced in this situation.
I think the question is, are you empowered? I think you've got experience, but have you got backing? Have you got commitment around budget? And are you going to be able to execute? I think that, there's no doubt you've got skillful people. But do you have a mayor that's going to say, yes, spend the money? It's probably where it comes down to be honest.
The mayor, and again in response to the mayor is incredibly invested in this, and I'll give you an example of how I know that. I am a week into the role at the mayor invited me up to his office to tell me some stuff. I came out of the lift, a separate lift to him. We ended up on the floor together. He set off into his office and used his little swipe card to get through the door into his super secret private office. I came along a bit behind him and I was doing something, and he said, "Oh, catch me up." I said, "Well, I'm not sure I can." I said, "I don't think I'm powerful enough that my swipe card will get me into your office." He said, "Well, if it doesn't, go back downstairs and find the person you need and get them to fix your swipe card so that whenever you need to come into my office and ask me a question, you can just walk straight in here." And I can now do that. I can walk straight into the mayor's office. He's super invested in this programme.
Swipe cards aside, none of us in the community have any sense of his investment in this. In fact, he's been quite public at his reticence. So that swipe card's great, not sure I can pay the mortgage on the swipe card.
I was simply answering the question about empowerment, and that's the answer.
Okay. Elaine. Hi. Just kind of listening to some of the language that's been used tonight, and I don't know if it's kind of Freudian slips, but we've heard removal of houses, remedial work may not be possible, and we've had comms from council saying stickers may change, white may change to another one, yellow may change to another one. Can we say that on the record there hasn't been recommendations from Auckland Council sent to the task force and the Minister recommending that all of Muriwai houses are actually in category 3? Can you say on the record that that has not been sent over?
Most definitely.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, we didn't hear that, right? I didn't quite hear the question.
The question, Elaine's question was, can the council and the government say categorically that the red stickered houses have not already been decided to be turned into category 3? Is it not a pre-made decision that they're now justifying through geotech? And Matt's response is no, definitely not. Sorry, I completely forgot to ask about a particular category of houses, which are the ones that are already wrecked beyond all recognition. are they waiting till the end of August?
You can't see two peaks looking at each other.
I've got no idea.
So I'll start with that. From a geotechnical perspective, it's pretty clear that those houses are almost certainly going to be Category 3. Once we get the results through, no one will be surprised to find them as Category 3. However, there is that other step that needs to come about sorting out the funding that's been talked through here. And so I can't answer beyond that point.
So that gives us a really, really obvious position for some houses where it's really around the political will to resolve this funding issue, and we are kept as the ball's being bounced around while central government and local government decide on the funding model. We're talking about quite a few houses and families that are being left out in the cold with no idea.
So if sorting out the funding, and this is a question to all of you, I think, if sorting out the funding is going to take place in the next 2-3 weeks, and those houses are not waiting on GHD, geotechnical reporting, can that process forge ahead?
I'll make a comment around the fundings. It's just important people have real clarity around what has been committed to there from central government and what the process will be now. And I'll then pass back to Matt for the question about the categorisation, because that does sit locally. So to be really clear, the central government has been clear. Cabinet has made a decision that we will contribute to a locally led buyout. We will financially contribute to that here and around the country. The process of working through the details of that, we expect to take place over the next few weeks. We will drive that forward to make sure that that moves through as quickly as possible. I don't think that that factor needs to be something which impacts the categorisation, which needs to be based on evidence. So in your community here, the process that's been described that's underway is that geotechnical work. That is what Auckland Council is leading. By roughly the end of this month, funding around clarity around funding should be in place. I do not expect that to be, I do not see any reason for that to be an impediment for the categorisation decisions being made.
I'll just make a comment. The reverse of the question about the houses that have been demolished is easy to resolve. What about those whose houses are sitting in an area untouched by the slip, perfectly good, and the speculation underlying is that they're in an area which may or may not, in the next 100 years, be in danger?
Yes, that is why the question again for folks at the back, it was about houses that may have not been damaged in the events of earlier this year, but there might be a risk to them in the future, how they handled. That is why the evidence-led categorisation process is important. And that's why it is critical that we recognise there's a difference between the initial placarding, which was about the risk at that particular time, and the categorisation process, which is about what we actually understand the evidence to say about risk. And so it is possible that there are houses that were not damaged, but there is a real risk there, and it would be wrong to not identify that and give those people an opportunity to be brought out. Bear in mind too, sir, that the important thing, I don't think I did say this before, the buyout scheme the government will fund will be a voluntary buyout scheme. So we'll be offering to people in Category 3 the ability to be bought out. The government will not be providing funding to require that. So I think that might be quite important in those situations as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Ross.
Yeah, just for the council, has the council put any thought into like future availability of land at Muriwai for residents who are obviously red sticker has moved on and that sort of thing?
Did you hear that?
Freeing up land.
Freeing up land, changing zoning.
Yeah, for people who have
Those sorts of
moved on.
Yeah.
Looks like to me it's one of the peaks, but yes, there is that future focused work in place. Has it been done right now? But no, but that's something where there will be a conversation through the recovery plan, and then in the future unitary plan changes.
If we have bought out, then where do they move from there if there's no land available?
Yeah, so a development project office is doing that investigation of what's possible and what could be developed.
So town planners aren't already thinking about it?
Town planners are thinking about it, so a development project office. That would require, obviously, working with landowners about any development opportunities and rezoning.
Quite a lot of council-owned land out here.
Quite a lot of it's crown land,
Okay, well, crown, government in all its many forms.
And reserve land.
Okay, any final questions? Otherwise, I'm going to say the bar will be open.
Yep.
Yes.
So the geotech to date, it's been explained, is all about monitoring the landslips and how that affects the property. Is there the intention to go further than that and understand the overall stability of the cliffs, the escarpment, and possibly the properties that are at the moment at the top, particularly unaffected?
Yes, so just to repeat the question for those at the back, it was about whether the geotechnical work is going to be looking at the areas that haven't had landslides yet, but might be at risk. And I confirm absolutely that is the whole point of the geotechnical work we're doing. So we start off by looking at the landslides that have occurred, and we use that to inform the models that we build, which we then apply to the whole town. We say, can this landslide that happened over on Mototara Road, can it happen in this place that hasn't moved yet? If it can happen, what does it look like and who does it affect? And that's how that will work.
Okay, so if that's the case, what's the sort of timescale for those investigations? And if you then get a situation where, there hasn't been a slip there, but we think there's a possibility of a risk, what is the plan after that? Do you go back and then say, oh, we need to vault it, we need to move the house? What's the sort of timescale for those sorts of investigations? And I appreciate it's not going to happen quickly, but what's that process?
Yes, so the question was about timeframes for that work. This is built into the end of August timeframe, so we will be assessing the risk across the whole area by the end of August. When it comes to what remedial works might be possible, that will depend on the level of risk, and it also depends on the categorisation process. Because if a lot of people decide they want to take up the government's offer about that, it would be a very different sort of remediation that's needed to if everyone wants to stay in place. So that information is needed before we can look at what is an appropriate remedial option.
So are we looking at possibly there could even end up being more like almost red sticker properties that are determined as a result of that?
So for example, along a wire.
A wire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it is unlikely. Until we get the results, I cannot say for sure. But the placarding process gives a good indication of the starting point of the risk. What we've seen for the landslides in this area is that they tend to be quite shallow. And that means that at the top of the slopes, they affect a relatively small section of land back from the existing slope of surface. It's really at the bottom where the hazard is really big because they accelerate down the slope and then run out quite a long way with a lot of energy. So it's at the bottom where the risk is much wider, and at the top the risk is a lot narrower.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm the token PIHA person. So I just wanted to go back to the question that you had about potentially opening up more land in Muriwai for the displaced residents that are Category 3. Is that also going to be happening in PIHA?
Yes.
More of a constrained environment, but yes, that's an option. And again, the discussion initially with the community about the desire to do that. That's true.
We didn't hear that at all.
Sorry.
We didn't hear that at all.
Oh, so the question was, is the same conversation about land being made available going to be had in PIHA? And the answer was yes. Yes. Any final questions?
Yes, can I direct the question to Matt and Mace, please?
Yes.
Earlier, before the minister arrived, there was some lengthy discussion about the exercise of transitional towers in relation to the cordons and the lifting of the cordon. Can you please indicate under which Act of Parliament those those transitional powers are being exercised?
So I think everyone heard the question. So the powers are provided through the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Act.
If I were to suggest to you that you do not have transitional powers under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act in the absence of a declaration of emergency, which has in fact been lifted by the Mayor, do you have any comment about that?
There's two phases to the emergency. So the emergency and then a transition into recovery. And so the powers, different powers are provided in the stage of the recovery phase of an emergency response and recovery. So I'm happy to talk to you about the specifics or provide you with specifics.
So you're referring to powers exercised by Council under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Statute?
That's correct. That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there was one more question, the lady with the orange top. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm probably the only one here from Waiatarua. My house fell down on Friday the 27th, and already, because my house is gone, and I'm just one section under the Piha Ridge, I'm already in a fight with EQC and being bullied between AA and EQC that, oh, you can build your house and here's $50,000 to re-landscape the Waitakere. And I want to know what relationship I'm envisioning with already that challenge between EQC, and I lived there 19 years and it's not safe. And I'd be dead in 4 minutes if I hadn't got out. And so I'm very confused at the different pieces of advice I'm getting even from the council, who by the way said, council do not repair land to protect private land, and they've got it in writing. The onus is on me to repair council land to protect my land.
I'm here to follow up with you now and talk to you about specifics.
Okay. Right.
Minister Woods, question to you. Thank you very much today for coming and supporting the community. Thank you for your role of central government in what's happened to our community. The question that I had for you that appears with some logic is simply the government's position historically with other regions was a 13 position. Is there not a position from central government to fast track the commitment from central government with a third position, or a third of the funding position, to secure mortgage holders that had mortgage liability, given the combination of liability risk that exists in the community between the parties present? The thinking that I have is simply, if with the delays of local government obviously requiring time to get their funding and things in place, if central government was able to set up a secondary task force that underline the commitment, as an example, there's 30 residents that I'm aware of that would be logical to assume that have a total loss liability. Given they also have mortgages, I can give you a quantum today that is $13 million in that pool that could be addressed today and dissolved. If central government had the appetite to do that, and of course the win for central government is simply a stay of execution of the mortgage debt, a stay of liability position as those things unfold, and also the pressure off the likes of TAS and taxpayer money with simply the employment accommodation, because there is a logical position inside that while we're paying mortgage, we're also going to run out of accommodation supplement, then the position is going to rest on TAS in that regard, and TAS is simply a great assistance, but it's not the full assistance of the standard of living position that we all are sitting in at present, that we're exposed to. So the question simply is it possible, representing our community that you've heard today, simply go back to Cabinet and request an advance cap for maybe a third of the commitment to extinguish some of the liability position for the mortgagees that are in the current position?
Look, thank you for that. Look, I hope you'll understand and appreciate that having just heard that particular proposal, that quite have delegated authority to give a further response on it. I think, and what you're proposing is something of a coming together of dealing with the short to medium term issue about people's accommodation costs on this side, with how we proceed with cost share around the buyout on this side. It's fair to say that at this point we are looking at those two issues separately. We're looking at pursuing a negotiation with Auckland Council to do cost share over here, and looking at what we might do over here in terms of the short to medium accommodation cost issue. So that is the approach we're taking at the moment. I'm generally through this process not ever saying a flat out no to any thoughtful ideas that have been sent my way. So I'd be happy to pick up further, get more detail and engage around that issue. But at this stage, to say we are looking largely for simplicity's sake to keep those two things separate. I will just come back to the point around the cost share discussion, because I know that there's probably a worry in people's minds about the time that might take. Just to be really clear, we will have people sitting down in a room somewhere here in Auckland in the next few days to be getting underway with that. So there's not going to be a big delay in that process beginning to move forward.
In the event that there is no confidence with Mayor Brown, and I'm not suggesting at all that there is, but there's certainly a feeling in the community that Mayor Brown hasn't been consistently behind the understanding of the community and the unique challenges that exist here. The Deputy Mayor has acknowledged that there is unique challenges. In the event that there is no confidence, simply that third position could be useful for central government in a state position that may affect residents, and the position that some residents are genuinely facing, that they could end up in bankruptcy from civil contracts with mortgagees at the end of the day. Simply a mortgage whilst it's no, this is simply an idea, but it seems to be a logical idea for a state execution of those mortgage holders.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call the session to an end. I can see that Double Park is already providing food outside, because I've just seen some walk upstairs, and I can also see a chink in the bar. Minister, you are most welcome to stay with us. Your posse of peeps are also most welcome to stay with us. I think that's going to be something that resonates for us. We have been keeping notes, and so we will be back in touch with you on the things that we have noted require some follow-up. And also we would like to invite you back, Minister, sooner rather than later. Certainly if you've got time between now and say mid-July, because this has been a very useful session to bring the posse of peeps and yourself to talk to the community, to hear the concerns, and we're also aware that each time we have an engagement like this, we get a little bit more momentum and a lot of shared understanding of what is happening here for us and what you are doing. So it's an opportunity for direct engagement, which I think we are keen to continue with.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. If I could just say in closing, I'd actually love to stay for a bevy with you, but I've got to get back to the Mount Ross School Memorial Hall for another community meeting this evening, such is my life. But can I just thank you for this meeting? I know this continues to be really hard for you. I really respect the fact that you support each other as a community, that your questions and engagement, while sometimes challenging, are constructive and looking out for each other. We've got things to take away here, both in terms of some individual situations, but in terms of areas where you're seeking more clarity sooner rather than later. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity. We'll work on a date, but you have my commitment. I'm very happy to come back and to continue continue this dialogue. In the meantime, I know that Auckland Council will continue to keep in close touch as the technical work proceeds, that everything will flow through. So thank you and go well.